So thank you, Jillian. And then Ahmed is asking, can you see me? So we can't see you. We can see if you ask on the chat, but we can't see you on video just because of the way the webinar platform is set up. So if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat. So we're gonna get going. And so the first thing is I just want to kind of make a brief introduction of a structure of a sales process that I've been following for the past 4 or 5 years that have been very helpful. It's helpful because it helps me understand how to design a sales process from end to end, from getting someone to know I exist to actually them buying from me. And so what I've learned is all sales processes, and we're talking about B2B mostly here, B2B sales processes from low levels of complexity to high levels of complexity, they all kind of follow this structure. You first have this process of identifying who are the people you want to talk to. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's session. Once we identify who we want to talk to, then we're going to move into how do we actually connect with them. So let's say I wanted to connect with Patrick. No, they have an amazing VC fund in Atlantic Canada. They seem to be the type of organization that we want to partner with. So I identify Patrick as a potential partner for our program. The second thing is, well, how do I connect with Patrick? How do I get in front of him in a contextual way, in a helpful way, so that we can start a conversation? So that's what we call the connect phase. We're going to be talking a lot about that today, right? If we find who we want to talk to, how do we get them to respond to us via email, via phone? How do we get that response? Once you get that response, you could say you created an opportunity, or at least after that first conversation. So that's where you go into the explore phase, where you're trying to understand how you can help, what is the problem that is trying to be solved, and then you can move on to like the advice stage, which is, now that I understand your problem, prospect, I can paint a picture, or I can help connect the dots into like, this is what you need to solve, this is how you can solve it, and maybe this is how we can help. And after that, the natural end result is you get a customer, you get someone buying from you. So that's the fourth stage of any sales process. Aman is asking if we're going to have this presentation after. So Patrick and Corey, I'm happy to share the slide deck with you. If you want to share with the attendees along with the recording, we can definitely do that. So let's get going. The first step then is to identify. And we're going to focus today on the identify and connect stages of a sales process. So the first thing is identify. Now, question for you, and if you can answer on the chat, please. Question is, why is it important to identify quality leads for your startup? On the chat, why do you need to identify quality leads? Not just any type of lead, but quality leads, ideal buyers for your startup. On the chat. I love it. I love it, right? You want to invest time with the right prospect. Like the function of sales is not to convince people to do something, right? That's not the function of sales. The function of sales is finding people who might need your help, and you're trying to help them connect the dots between the problem they're trying to solve and how you can help. You're not trying to sell ice to the Eskimo, right? You're trying to find who needs your help. So you need quality leads to save time. The worst or the most common aspect of ineffective sales teams is they waste time with non-buyers. And so we want to avoid this. So we need to identify quality leads. Now, and Bob, Courtney, Mike, Aman, like these are all great. Ahmed, great answers. Like basically don't waste time. Jeff, very true, right? Besides not wasting time, we want to make sure, like, are we helping people we can actually help? If we help people we can actually help, that's going to create meaningful, strong relationships and true buyers who are going to be repeat customers. But not only that, that's going to generate some sort of virality for our business, because then the most important source of leads, if we keep doing things right, is not going to be us marketing or warm calling prospects, is our clients recommending us to their networks. So very important that we not only identify, but also sign and close customers from our ideal buyer profile. So with that in mind, the first thing that we need to do logically is to define our ideal buyer profile. Now, question for you on the chat: how many of you feel you have developed a solid ideal buyer profile for your business? Right? And it's not easy in the thick of that now. I think that's probably the most common question. Like, we're trying to figure that out, and it's hard, right? Especially when you're starting out. Like, defining an ideal buyer profile, the nice part about it is, well, we're trying to understand where we should focus. What it also means is you need to make a conscious decision not to pursue a number of people. You're making a conscious decision to not sell to X. And when you're starting out, if you're the earlier you're on your startup, the harder it is to disqualify potential buyers even before you connect with them. It's scary, right? If I say I'm only going to help startups who are pre-Series A in funding. So what I'm saying is, well, I'm not going to help startups who are in the Series B, C, D stages of their development. And not that we do, but like just as an example, uh, then I would say, well, like I could help Series B startups, like startups who are at that stage. I could help startups who are in the Series C stage. So it's hard to renounce to a subset of people who you might be able to help, but they're not the ideal. And so, and as Danielle says, right, it evolves, right? As you go to market and you decide on an ideal buyer, you might find out they're actually not the ideal, or you might go through like a, a wider group of people, and as you work with them, you start understanding, well, which of these group are better for us, which subset of that group. Like for HubSpot, for our first 10 years, it was mid-market marketing directors. Could we help small companies? Yes. Did we help small companies? Yes. Did we help corporates? Yes. But all our focus on our go-to-market, the way we design our go-to-market, the way our marketing was designed, our sales team was structured, was optimized to help the mid-market, the corporate director, the marketing directors of companies in the mid-market segment, because that's where we had the biggest traction. Now, in the last 10 years, we've evolved where we now can help corporates because we're powerful enough to help corporates. And we're also easy enough to use to help smaller teams. But our focus for the first 10 years was the mid-market, the marketing directors of mid-market companies. And that helped us a lot to keep that focus and really execute well. So I wouldn't say a formula, but there are 3 elements of an ideal buyer profile that I think if you nail, you're going to be well off. And it's going to lead into then how do you communicate with them. So the 3 ingredients for an ideal buyer profile are this. First, who you're helping. This is where maybe many of you have something. Like, I help this type of person in this type of company, maybe in this geography, etc. And the more specific you can get, the better. Now, the 2 things you need to add to that description of what your ideal buyer profile is, what are the goals they're pursuing, right? I could help a CFO, right? I help CFO of these types of companies in these regions of this industry, maybe. But the CFOs have different goals they're trying to solve. So which of those goals am I helping with? And so I define the goals that they have and which ones I help with. The other thing I define for my ideal buyer profile is, what are the challenges that they're trying to overcome? So if we go back to HubSpot, right, we focus on mid-market marketing directors. And what they're trying to do is, they're in an organization that is now demanding the marketing team to generate leads for the sales team. That was the usual goal that we're trying to help. You need to generate more qualified leads for your sales team. A little bit an evolution of the old-fashioned way of doing marketing, where you just do a bunch of stuff and then like, you kind of correlate that with an increase of sales. More modern sales teams 15 years ago were more deliberate, because now, because of internet, you can measure everything. Now you're asking, we need this amount of leads for our sales team. So you're being measured on leads. So that's a goal. Need to generate quality leads through online marketing. The challenges that we're getting, they were not really able to measure what was more effective. They weren't really able to measure which of the leads that we're generating were getting close into customers, and they were not really able to penetrate the digital marketing world in an effective way. They were struggling with, SEO. They were creating content, but they weren't really generating leads from the content they were creating. So there were a ton of challenges that was getting in the way of these mid-market marketing managers creating the amount of quality leads that their teams needed. So that's how we define a ideal buyer profile. Now, once you have that, and a man is asking a question, I think this is probably from earlier, that's how we define the ideal buyer for HubSpot, mid-market marketing manager, which back then was Marketing Mary. We had a name for our buyer, and we had a very detailed description of who she was. About 5 years ago, actually, we had to reboot it. So it changed from Marketing Mary to Marketing, Marketing Michelle. And the reason was, with the passing of years, so 10 years later, our buyer had evolved in their understanding of marketing technology and how they bought software and all that stuff. So we need to keep, even if you're focusing on an ideal buyer, you need to understand they're going to evolve with time. In some industries, faster than others. So it's not an static thing. Now, once we have this, we create what I call the connect positioning statement. What I mean by this is, now we're going to craft how we communicate with our ideal buyer profile once we find who we want to talk to, right? Let's say I want to talk with Corey. How do I address Corey when I approach him? And this could be, an email on LinkedIn. It could be a message somewhere else. It could be an email, or it could be a phone call. And so one example is this one we have here. Now, what I want to show you is how this is actually broken down. Because as an engineer, I like formulas. And so this actually follows a formula. And this is a formula. The formula has 5 elements. The 5 elements correlate a little bit with that ideal buyer profile we spoke about before. The first element is, well, who do we help? And so in this case, we have, a startup founders. Now, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the more detailed, the better. So as I'm going through this positioning statement, I'm thinking, well, what are ways for me to improve this statement? Is, well, I could say startup founders, or I could say, well, startup founders of B2B SaaS companies who are between the seed and Series A stages. Now, that's way more specific. When I say that way, right, let's say you ask me, what do you do, Jose? I'm like, well, I help startup founders like you. Or if I say, well, I help startup founders of B2B SaaS companies who are between the seed and Series A stages. That minor change, didn't it feel like I'm more of an expert now? Because now I'm so focused on a specific persona that, if you're really focusing on that specific segment, if you are a B2B SaaS founder and you're between the seed and Series A stages, I'm going to catch your attention, because that's exactly me. So the more specific, the better on who you work with. So that's aspect number 1. Aspect number 2 is then you're going to describe that goal. We know this startup founder is passionate about the problem they're trying to solve, and they found the problem solution fit. Like they feel strongly that they have the solution for the problem. So I'm describing the goal. The goal is to solve that problem with the solution they have, and they grow the company based on that solution. Now, the third aspect is, and this is an important aspect, this is the psychological element of this whole thing. That is the non-logical part of this statement, is I'm going to use emotion to get a little bit of traction. And so when I'm describing the goal, then I'm going to change. I'm going to talk about the challenges. But before I change from a goal to the challenge, I'm going to use a sentiment type of word to elicit some sort of emotional response. And that is very, very helpful. So I like to use frustrated, words like frustrated. You know, you're trying to solve this problem. You found problem solution fit. You're trying to get this solution to more customers in your market, but you're frustrated because you haven't gotten any traction in your market. And you're struggling to show that traction, and you're struggling to secure your next round of funding. So now I'm talking about the challenge. You can't sell as much as you need to secure the next round of funding that is actually going to let you accelerate growth. Then I do a pause, and then that's number 4, and then I finalize with a question. Does this happen to you? So when someone asks me, what do you do? Or when I reach out to someone and I try to describe what do I do, this is how I describe it. Now, question for you on the chat. What am I not talking about in my connect positioning statement? What am I not talking about? Right? What the hell do you do, Jose? I mean, I understand you work with these very specific type of people. I feel like you understand what we're trying to get, we're trying to achieve, and what's getting in the way. I still don't know what you do, and this is on purpose, right? Like when you're connecting with someone the first time, they don't care about what you do. Like when they ask you, if you're networking, they ask you, what do you do? They don't want to know what you do. Unless it's investors, maybe that's a little different. But if you're talking with potential buyers and they ask you, what do you do? If you call someone, what do you do? They don't really want to know what you do because you're new to them. You've met them for 10 seconds. When they ask you, what do you do? What do you think your prospect is trying to understand? When your prospect asks you in the first 10 seconds of meeting you, they ask you, what do you do? What are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to answer? Right? Do you matter to me? Right? Are you relevant to my life? Should I invest one more second with you? And that never has to do with what you do. It has to do with, can you help me? Can you offer value to me? And so instead of pitching what I do, I tell you, I work with people like you who have these goals and are facing these problems. Is that you? And if that's you, then we should have a conversation. So this is what we're trying to accomplish. Now, question for you. Why do we have element number 5 of this formula, which is, does it happen to you? That question at the end. Why do you think that is important? Like someone, let's say in this context, someone asks you what you do and you responded with this. Why do you end your answer with a question? Right? A call to action elicits a response. I like the last part, elicits a response. This is what usually happens when you're meeting someone. They're asking you what you do. They don't really know what you want to do. Now, if you answer with what you do, or even if you answer with this statement and you don't finalize with a question, what's the next logical thing your prospect is going to do if you don't end with a question? They ask you, what do you do? You answer this. You don't end your answer with a question. What happens? Well, in the best case scenario, they're going to ask you another question, right? And never in the history of sales, the prospect asks the questions. It needs to be the consultant, it needs to be the seller who asks the questions to understand and gauge the situation. So the reason we ask this question at the end is we want to change the dynamic of the conversation. We want to change it to a dynamic where we're asking the questions and you, Mrs. Prospect, Mr. Prospect, you're explaining what you're going through, and I'm trying to gauge, understand if I can help. So very important. This is one of the most common mistakes I've seen people do when they apply this formula is they forget to ask a question at the end. And what happens is Then they're in this interrogatory mode when the seller is answering questions, and that is not the correct way of doing sales, especially if you're in a consultative sales process. So this is the formula. How do you use the formula? So the first thing is you need to find the leads. And we're not going to spend a ton of time here, but basically these are good places to find leads. Of course, marketing is a way to generate leads for your company, but there are other more pragmatic ways, quick win ways to also generate leads for your business. If you work with, in an accelerator program, or if you work with a VC, they're really good at helping you connect with people you can talk to that can either be a customer or connect you with more people who can be customers. So that network that a VC fund or an accelerator program provides is a huge asset to get to customers. Now, what's next? If we've identified people we want to talk to, we know exactly who we want to talk to, and we kind of know what to say. No, we can't know. We know exactly what we want to say to them when we meet them. What's next? So if we go back to this, we need to connect with them. So we know what to say to them, but now how do we say it? And so the connect phase is when someone reacts to your approach. And so what is the point of the connect phase? This is when you pick up the phone or your email or your social consistently to connect with someone. When that conversation happens, what is the goal of that first interaction? So again, very early on in a sales process, that first interaction with a prospect, they bought into your connect positioning statement. What is the ultimate goal of that conversation? Let's say they engage in that conversation, or they want to meet you for 15 minutes on the phone. What is the goal of that first initial short conversation with a prospect? I love it. Disqualify. So we want to understand, can we help you? Do you have a problem we can help with? Can we help with that problem? And do you want to get help? Right? Those are the three things to qualify early on. What else are we trying to do? Right? So in that qualification process, we're trying to understand that high-level challenge. We also want to know the next steps. In our case, in this process, a consultative process, usually what you want to do is have your next step being, hey, now let's create a space of time for us to go deep into the problem you're trying to solve. Ohad is saying establish authority, which is another way for me of saying, establish that relationship, that credibility. Like, hey, I am someone that can help you. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to get the relationship going, get someone to understand this is someone that can help. We're trying to understand if this is a prospect that we should invest more time in because they have the type of problems we can help with, and they have the type of mentality of they want to get help. They want to solve those issues. And obviously, finally, we want to schedule that next step in our sales process to keep it going forward. Now, if those are the things we're trying to accomplish, and it's very easy, right? We're just trying to get the relationship going. We're trying to understand if they have a problem we can solve with and help with, and then set up the next step. Then what, on the other side of the coin, what are we trying to avoid in this process? I love it, Sahan. Avoid selling, right? We don't need to sell, right? It's not yet the time to sell, right? Talk about product. I love it, right? Elevator pitch. I have the example here. Whenever I was in this connect phase of a sales process, when I was in sales in HubSpot, whenever I found myself speaking about HubSpot or about what inbound is, I knew I wasn't going in the right direction. You also don't deep dive into how you can help, right? You first need to get a good grasp of the problem before you go into a solution. So these are the things you're trying to avoid. And as Sahan said, the number one thing you do not do on a connect call is sell. And what I mean by this is this should actually feel like a huge relief for you. Like for me, it was one of the most important things that happened in my sales career is when I understood that in that first interaction with someone I don't really know, I don't need to sell them. I don't need to convince them to buy my product. I'm only having a conversation with a human being to understand if they have a problem I can help with. That's it. What that did for me is it relieved so much pressure off my shoulders to just have a more natural conversation that it actually made me a better listener, reduce a lot of stress of what I was doing, and made me a little bit more effective when establishing those initial connections, because now you're more genuine, right? If you're just trying to understand if you can help, you're more genuinely trying to be curious. You're more genuinely trying to understand the problem and asking logical questions. You're not asking leading questions. When you have the pressure of selling, you tend to ask leading questions, like questions that will get you the answer, that will get you to say what you want to say so that they buy from you. And that is not a human natural conversation that actually pushes off your prospects. Cool. So so we avoid selling, which is a great thing. It's going to make it much more easy for you to sell. Now, what is the hardest part of the connect call for you? Not in general, like for you. What is the hardest part of if I asked you, why are you not doing 5 of these conversations every day? What would you say is the biggest problem? What's the hardest thing? What is the biggest thing getting in your way? Right? Man, Ahmed, you're so honest, right? It's very true. Those of you who are saying, well, we're busy, we're founders, we're dealing with legal stuff, we're dealing with financial stuff, we're dealing with a bunch of stuff. And I remember spending 2 days dealing with insurance for a company that I hadn't even built, but I had to. And it was so annoying. I had to do all these things that are not building the product I want to build. I know you're busy, but the real problem is, I would argue, maybe some of you are the exception, but I would tell you, the majority of people, even sales professionals, the majority of people who struggle with sales is they're afraid to pick up the phone, right? They're afraid of reaching out to strangers. And that is a big thing to overcome, especially if you're a technical founder who have never been in sales. I told you in the beginning of this presentation, that was me 12 years ago, right? 12 years ago, yes, I was busy. It is easy to be busy and avoid the things you want to avoid. But I would tell you, the most important things you need for a successful business is you need clients, right? You could have the best product in the world. If you don't have clients, you don't have a business. So the most important thing you need to do is reaching out to people who can buy what you sell. So it is painful. This session is not about, hey, sales is easy. Sales is not uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. My first few days in sales, I would lock myself up in a room to have those conversations, and I would have to do like breathing exercises. And after I was done with my cold block hour, I would go to the restroom and rest my mind. It was so stressful for me. But it gets better, and it gets better pretty quickly, especially if then you have this mentality of, I'm just here to help. Those first conversations, which were the hardest for me because I'm reaching out to strangers, if I'm not trying to sell anything, I'm just trying to meet someone and see if they have a problem I can help with, then it becomes much more easy, right? The fear of connecting with prospects is all in your head, right? And we're not gonna get into the excuses we use to avoid making that time to connect. We all know what those are. But we all know that those are, at the end of the day, excuses. We need to get over it. So what is one tip that I have for you today? Of all the things we're going to talk about today, you're going to maybe laugh, but the most important thing that I'm going to tell you to do, if you're really serious about starting to sell what you're trying to sell, is put time in your calendar to do prospecting. That is the single most important thing that I've done with my sales career is I put time on my calendar to do prospecting, because everyone avoids prospecting, not founders, salespeople who are only hired at an organization like HubSpot to sell. Even them who are, the only job is to sell, they still avoid prospecting, because very few people really love reaching out to strangers. And so you put that time in your calendar, and it's kind of like that annoying guy with a cowbell, like reminding you, hey, you have to prospect, right? 8 a.m. every day for 1 hour. You have to prospect. You're like, oh man, but I'd rather be coding. I'd rather be, doing my marketing stuff. I'd rather be doing all these things. I'd rather be polishing my pitch deck for investors. No, right? You have to get out of yourself and do some prospecting. So put it in your calendar. The best way to do this, I would say, minimum 1 hour a day, every day. And so one of the things that I've seen people do is, well, they'll block a whole afternoon on Fridays or on whatever day, but usually it's Fridays. All afternoon on Friday, I'll do prospecting. It's 4 or 5 hours. That is not very helpful. Like, you rather have 1 hour every day, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make prospecting a part of your daily routine. If it becomes something that is a routine that you do every day, it eventually becomes something you don't have to think about so much. The first few days are painful, but when you're doing every day, you're doing a 1 hour at 8 a.m., you wake up, drink your coffee, and the first thing you do is prospect. Eventually, after a couple of weeks, you're just automatically just going in prospecting. You're not thinking about the decision of or the fear of prospecting. You're just doing it. So put it on your calendar. One big advice that I have for you. The second thing is, when you're reaching out to prospects, don't just do it once. This is the most common mistake salespeople do, not founders, just salespeople in general do, is they don't really reach out more than once to prospects. Like 40% of reps reach out once, which is scary, right? Like not even half reach out once. So most leads out there are not even reached out to, which I can attest, because I've worked with clients at HubSpot and we're talking about, hey, marketing, we're generating leads, but they're not closing. And when I went and helped them understand the leads, and I would filter by no activity, like 60% of their leads had no activity in them, which is scary. The second scariest thing is only a third of reps actually reach out twice. And so I can attest to that as well. When I was working with a sales team and they were finding leads, they were like, we found 150 leads to reach out to this week. And we would talk about the connect statement, and they would send emails, make calls. And a week later, they will come in and say, Jose, we tried it. It didn't work. 1 in 100 responded. And we don't know what to do. I'm like, well, what happened when you reach out the second time? They just blank stares, right? They never reached out a second time. So a big differentiator for you is reach out to your prospects and have a process to reach out to them more than once. This is not to spam. We're going to talk about a process here later on. But if you reach out more than 2-3 times, you're going to automatically create a competitive advantage against other sales teams in your industry, because nobody's reaching out more than twice. Actually, for HubSpot, and the graph we have here is not from HubSpot, it's from Harvard, and they did a study with InsightSales.com. Hundreds of thousands of sales teams they evaluated. About 90% of prospects will respond if you try more than 4 times. If you try 5 or 6 times to connect with them, 90% of them will respond. So that gives you an idea of the amount of persistence you need to go for to make something happen. This is based on data. This is not based on intuition. They studied how many attempts and the response rate based on how many attempts you were doing, and then the amount of reps who were doing those amount of attempts. So you can see how like less than 5% of reps are trying 5 or more times, which would get them to 90% response rate. So it really is an arbitrage opportunity if you think about it. You try 5 or 6 times, you're going to be so much ahead of your competition that you won't even believe it. So how do you do it? How do you not spam people? So let's talk about that in the next 7 minutes. So we have 10 minutes at the end for questions. So the first thing is, you need a process. In general, right? This could vary a little bit. For HubSpot, enterprise customers require about 15 attempts. Small businesses require about 5 attempts to get to a level of response that we want. After that, it declines. But in general, between 6 and 10 touches gets the job done. And so what I mean by touches is one email is one touch, one call is one touch. So what I do is one call, one email in the same day. You can do whichever one you want to do first. One call, one email. So those are 2 touches on the first round, day 1. Second is, how often did you do it? Do you wait a week, or do you do the next day, the next round of attempts? What we found at HubSpot, after doing this, we are a high volume of leads company, so we have a lot of data. What we found was the sweet spot is the 2-day follow-up. So if we reach out on a Monday, we won't reach out on a Tuesday. We will reach out again on a Wednesday. That's a 2-day follow-up. What we found is if you do it every day, you become annoying. If you do it every week, like once a week, you become kind of like a newsletter that people just see that email and they just delete it. So you don't get reaction. So with every day, you might get an angry reaction. With once a week, you might get like a no response at all. So 2-day follow-up is the best frequency that we found works. And then, of course, you can use technology to help you go through this process. Like, how do you do one call, one email every 2 days for 5 or 6 rounds and keep a track of what's going on? That's where CRMs come in. So, check that out. Check technology that can help you keep track of executing this rhythm of prospecting. Now, that's we have a lot here, right? We're almost done. We have, and those of you who have to go, thank you for coming. We're going to have the recording later on, and we're going to have the slide deck. But we have, who do we want to connect with? We know what to say to them. We know what to try to do and not what to avoid. And we have the frequency to which we're trying to get a response. Now, level of activity, a little bit more of what we already spoke. The other thing is, you want to make this as personable as possible. If you don't have time to be a little bit personal, it may mean that your go-to-market is wrong. If you need so much volume that you can't invest 25 seconds in understanding who you're reaching out to, you're more in like the e-commerce touchless type of go-to-market. You don't need a sales team. If you need a sales team that is going to do a complex sales process, even if you have volume of leads you need to get to, you should be able to invest a little bit of time researching and personalizing the outreach. Research doesn't mean 30 minutes before I send an email. It could just mean 30 seconds or a minute. And of course, the times will vary with experience, and it will vary with if you have technology giving you that contextual information behind. But research is one of the aspects of personalizing which actually results in a response. If I send an email blast to 100 prospects, that's not a prospecting email, that's a marketing blast, that's a spam. You're going to get very low response rates. If you alternatively have some level of personalization on that email when you're reaching out, if I'm reaching out to Corey and I say, hey, Corey, I was learning about Concrete VC. I know you guys are, investing in these type of companies in Atlantic Canada. I love what you're doing. I learned about this startup that you invested in. These are the type of startups we love helping. I would love to connect with you. And we know that VCs are trying to get these companies to their next round of funding, but they're struggling with, and I'll do my connect statement. That level of personalization in that first paragraph augments the possibility of or the probability of Corey responding tenfold, right? One of the things that HubSpot sales team is doing is actually we're sending video prospecting. So we'll create a 1-minute video recording for each prospect that we're reaching out to. Even then, you can still get 10, 15 of these emails done every hour if you're very efficient. So it's not like you don't get to do volume if you're personalizing with like videos for each one. but you know, I'm just talking about being personable so that you're more effective. And then finally, when you're reaching out to a company, you may reach out through different stakeholders. Make sure your positioning statement and how you're talking about what you do resonates with their role. If I'm selling inbound as a means of growth to company and HubSpot as a software to execute inbound, the way I talk about inbound with a CEO is very different than the way I talk about inbound with the CMO, right? CMO is interested in quality lead generation. The CEO of a SaaS company is worried about CAC to LTV. So if I'm talking about inbound, I talk about inbound in regards to how it impacts CAC and LTV if I'm talking with a CEO. If I'm talking with a CMO, it's like, how does it augment the quality of the leads you're generating? How does it make it easier for you to identify the highest quality leads so that you hand over those leads to sales, and so that they have a better more effective way closing those leads, so that your leads close go up, the influence revenue goes up. So influence revenue, quality of leads, handover of leads to sales, those are concepts that a CMO is worried with. The CEO is not worried about this. The CEO is worried about CAC to LTV. So make sure that you also connect the context you have about your prospect with the role they have, so that you have the most personalized outreach possible. And I know we ran out a little bit out of time. This will be an example, but we can skip over this. I want to kind of go through a checklist for you guys to work with. A series of steps to get you executing of what we spoke about today. One is define your ideal buyer profile. Second, define where your leads are gonna come from. Like, ideally have some sort of, I know sometimes you're kind of guesstimating, but like have an idea of what is the quota that each source of leads is going to have for you. Like if you're saying, I'm going to reach out to my network and I'm going to ask my network for 3 potential leads for my business, and I know that I'm going to get about 40 leads from referrals this month or this quarter. I know I'm going to get 10 leads from my contacts at the VC fund that invested in me this month. I'm going to get this much from this. I'm going to get this much from this. I'm going to get this much from this. And that's, 200 leads that I can get this month. Having quotas allows you to kind of understand which sources of leads are going to be more effective for you and where to invest time. Third, develop your connect call positioning statement. What we spoke about before, the formula with the 5 elements. Work on that. Like if you want advice or just want feedback on your positioning statement, feel free to send me a LinkedIn message. I'll check it with you and I'll give you some feedback on it. But that's very important to do. Your connect call positioning statement. Establish a sequence for prospecting. Try to make it something that is consistent, that you can start evaluating. Okay, should I try 5 times? Should I try 10 times to connect with a prospect? At what point do I have diminishing returns so that I can establish a consistent way of prospecting? And again, as I said, number 1 tip from today is block time in your calendar for prospecting. I assure you it's going to change significantly how you sell. So that's all I had for today. I know we kind of ran there throughout the end, but hopefully this was helpful. Thank you all for coming. I can stay here for another 10 minutes if you can as well, to answer any questions you may have. If you want to ask a question with voice, let me know. I need to promote you to a different sort of to like a panelist, so you can talk. Otherwise, you can ask the question on the chat, and I'll go through the answers there. And I have some questions here from before. Okay. So Aman asked, how do you differentiate your approach when so many others are following the same approach? Yeah, if your connect statement is the same as other company, you need to go back and review it. You may be needing more detail, right? If I say I help startup founders who are trying to grow their sales, but they can't really get the number of leads they want, you're going to get that positioning statement from 150 marketing agencies out there, even from programs like HubSpot for startups. That's not a great positioning statement, right? So if you're finding yours is very similar to a competitor, you need to go back and see where's level of detail that I can add. Or if I'm talking about problems or the challenges, can I be a little bit more specific? Can I make it more tangible so that the prospect understand, I really understand what you're going through? And again, with the persona itself at the beginning of the statement, the more specific you are, the more you're going to make visible that you're an expert on a very specific subsegment of the market. Like I'm not an expert in inbound for every single company out there in the world. Like inbound works for a wide array of companies, but I'm really good at helping startups who are between the seed and Series A stage implement inbound so that they can grow their sales. That's my specialty. Like even within HubSpot, if I send you a positioning statement, mine will be different than the sales rep from the corporate segment at HubSpot. So go back and review your connect statement if it's similar to others. Jeff is asking, there are seasonal characteristics of certain industry which relate to field data processing of the client operations. So keeping track of these general patterns and marketing conditions is usually important, at least in my case, something above the individual clients to break out by commodity. Okay, so if I get this of the general concept of the question, Jeff, there are seasonal characteristics of certain industries. That is very true. So when we go back to reaching out to prospects and doing our research, part of that is understanding the seasonality. So one segment that has been very successful using inbound and HubSpot is education and universities. Now, most universities in the US have a certain kind of cycle they go through. Like admissions have a certain time of year where they happen, and then incoming students have a certain other period of time where they're coming in, and they have certain challenges that are very seasonal. If I reach out to a college who is in the stage of interviewing candidates to fill out their classes, and I talk about generating more leads, that's not going to resonate. That's not the problem they're trying to solve now. The problem they're trying to solve now is how do they deal with 1,000 applicants? Let's say I'm talking with Harvard. They have 1,000 applicants for 100 seats. Their problem is, well, how can I make sure that I'm investing time with those who will come and not go to like Stanford or MIT? And how do I invest time with those who are going to give the most value or the most quality to that class? Understanding who those are in my database, it has nothing to do with how do I do better ads for the programs. Is how do I organize my CRM and understand behavioral patterns with these prospects that allow me to understand which are the most likely to be the better prospects for me. So it's more like a sales problem they're trying to solve, not a marketing problem they're trying to solve. So my outreach to them is about this and not about, hey, do you know that if you had a blog and you publish your papers from your professors, you probably get more leads for your programs next year? That's not going to resonate. So yeah, definitely embed seasonal characteristics in the way you're reaching out to prospects. Someone here is asking about HubSpot. So maybe we can take that offline, but upgrade to HubSpot starter package and finding it overwhelming. What are the core parts you'd recommend sales team use as a starting point? So here's what I would recommend. I know this is more HubSpot stuff, but I'll take 2 minutes. One is go to the HubSpot Academy if you haven't already and do the HubSpot Sales Software Certification, because it lays out the tools that you have with Sales Starter, but it also lays them out in a way that resonates with what we call the inbound sales methodology. Like some tools are for identifying who to connect with. Some tools are for actually connecting with them. So those would be like sequences and meetings links. And some others are for moving deals through your pipeline from like the first conversation to purchase. So starting point is HubSpot Sales Software certification. Second is start with you and with HubSpot. A lot of people do the opposite. They start with the tool and trying to see how do I make the tool fit my world. Is the opposite. Start with your sales team. What is your sales goal? What are the KPIs on which you're measuring these goals? And then what are the processes you're trying to execute with your sales team? And then how can you build those processes using the HubSpot sales tools? So start with goals, then process, and leave the tool for the end. If you do it that way, I'll assure you, you'll find it less overwhelming. The other thing is, if you have process and you can't figure out how to do it in HubSpot or what's the best way to do it in HubSpot, you can click the help button and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. I haven't been able to figure out how to implement it with HubSpot. Can someone help me? And most likely what they'll do is they'll send you within 24 hours an article that says, here's how you do X. And it's always very easy to do. So hopefully that helps. If you continue to have problems, Chantal, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Cool. Very true, Patrick, right? Raising capital is sales, right? And I think Patrick, being on that other side of the coin, being like the recipient, like he could be a good source of knowledge for you to like, how do you approach VCs in a meaningful, impactful way? If you're trying to sell the idea of, hey, invest in me. So Patrick, what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they wanted to reach out to you for advice on that?
Sure. I mean, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn or go through our website, which is just concrete.vc, and submit a form on our contact us page.
Excellent. Yeah, it's all sales in the end, right? It's all sales. Like, how are you relevant for my life? Like, do your research. What is the VC investing in? Are they specialized in a certain industry and specialized in a certain stage? Like, do your homework. Like, I know I am a relevant investment for you, Patrick, because I learned that you do these type of investments. These are your strengths. This is what it looks like you're looking for. I think I'm that. I think I'm that. Can we talk some more? So definitely, this framework can help with finding investors. Cool. Well, if you don't have any more questions now, we can all kind of go and have lunch. If you have questions after the fact, after we hang up, because it happens, like, oh man, I wish I had asked this question. Feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Jose Martins, the only Jose Martins HubSpot. Jose Martins HubSpot, the only one. So it's very easy to find. And again, thank you, Patrick and Corey, for making this happen. I'm delighted to be partnering with you. And it really shows how you're genuinely interested in helping startups be successful. So I'm glad that we're partners and we were able to put this together.
And thank you for putting on the presentation.
Good stuff. All right, everyone. So again, if you want to reach out to Patrick, you know how to do that. If you want to reach out to me, you know how to do that. Have a great afternoon, and looking forward to seeing your success. Bye, everyone.